Have you ever actually met anyone who openly thinks this is good art? If I said that I did, would you immediately dismiss me as pretentious or elitist or just dumb? Someone must like it, surely. It's sold for 6 million. But social media is full of people ridiculing modern art, conceptual art, and in the cleanest crosshairs, performance art. And if you only ever access modern art through social media, no doubt you'd think it was stupid. I mean, it's very easy to hate. But if you're genuinely curious, if people actually do secretly really like this stuff, then stick around, because by the end of this video, I'll hopefully have persuaded you that none of it is as ridiculous as you. I'm Sam, this is Art Loud, a channel that explores arty concepts, and I think the banana taped to the wall is brilliant. If you give me 10 minutes to try and explain why, and you don't afterwards, then you don't have to join the Patreon to help me make more of these videos. Stick around. I'll explain why the idea that you could have done it, or that the idea that it's just money laundering, don't actually hold any weight. But to be clear, even after that, you might genuinely feel that these conceptual art world emperors are genuinely wearing no clothes, and that these concepts are artistically naked. But the thing is, it's all too easy to dismiss from outside of the art world. And if you're not in that world, it's a very exclusive place. So let me just bring you in a way that you might like. If you hate this kind of stuff, then you'd probably love the story of an artist who's poking fun at the big conceptual art trend of found art, you know, where people just find things and put them in a gallery and put a profound concept onto them, like, you know, coat hangers or a pile of rocks. Well, he stole, and I mean actually stole, the entire contents of another artist's show from a nearby gallery and put on his own show called Another Fucking Ready-Made, before the police came and threatened to arrest him unless he gave it all back. So there are artists who do this, who criticise this seemingly bonkers form of art. Then you'd probably love the story of an artist that, on getting a really prestigious plot at the Venice Biennale, sold the space to an advertising agency, made huge profits, and pissed off the snobs of the art world. A final one that's really good as a satirical kick in the teeth of the whole absurdity of the American art world was an artist who made an artwork called America to reflect the excesses of the art market, which was a toilet made entirely out of 18-karat gold. And he installed it in New York in the Guggenheim. And to perfectly evoke the American dream of opportunity for all, it was fully functional and had hundreds of thousands of people using it. And with that kind of public access, when it was on tour once, it got stolen. So with that context, what's clever about the banana? Well, partly it's about where it was exhibited. Now, just as if I wore bin bags down to the supermarket, you might give me a wide berth. But if I were to wear them on the Paris runway in Fashion Week, you'd look at me differently. Well, the banana taped to a wall wasn't taped to a wall in your garage. It was taped to a wall in Art Basel. And why that matters might need a bit of context, because not everyone can put something up at one of the world's most international, prestigious art fairs. If there were 2 films made about paint drying that no one had ever seen, and you were trying to promote both of them, one of them was filmed by you, and the other one by Scorsese. Which one do you think is more likely to be risked giving a premiere at the Cannes Film Festival? Who made it matters. So, who taped the banana to the wall at Art Basel? Well, it was done by a man called Maurizio Cattelan. And who was he? Well, he was the exact same artist who did all 3 of the examples I gave earlier. The billboard, the stolen show, and the golden toilet. He's been making work for 40 years, and everything he's done is cheeky and satirical. I first heard of him when he made a model of the Pope that had been struck down by a meteor. But there is perhaps a clue in the title of the banana work. It's called Comedian, and every single one of you who rants and raves and says that they could do that fall perfectly into the punchline. Because that is the artwork. It's not the banana. It's your outrage, your dismissal, your certainty that it's extremely meaningless. It's the ultimate art world rage bait. Because everybody thinks they're above it. Perfectly, predictably. We all dismiss it. Why? Because nobody thinks this is materially good art. So we can confidently scoff and laugh down at it for its utter lack of artistic value. That's the setup for the joke. Even now, people who aren't able to think for longer than the length of a social media clip can't clock that the value was always in the outrage. But he knew that if he set it up right, someone would come along and complete the joke. And as the world recoiled, they did. it sells for 6 million. It's perfectly played, because while it has no artistic value, by the metric of value in the world, it has. And that opens up a fun idea of why and what we value. While we know and respect the old masters for their craftsmanship, form and mastery of material to mimic a likeness or image, and that still exists today, that's much more like the art that I make, modern art has never tried to compete on those grounds. And yet still, unfortunately, it gets judged by them. And for a bit of context, I'm not a conceptual artist. I paint, I draw, and as a traditional artist, I must admit, it is easy to hate a lot of contemporary art. But that impulse is so often reactive, simplistic, boring, and more than anything, predictable. And I've fallen into this trap. 10 years ago, I visited an art school in Spain. And for a few months, I thought I was clever in making a mockery of conceptual art. I took a bucket full of random words and picked out 2 at a time, and my performance piece was to explain concepts that I could come up with on the spot. I would pick out a word saying pink and a word saying tractor and say, hang a pinkly sprayed tractor tyre on the wall and talk about how it shows the shallow, chipped veneer of tolerance on the toxically masculine industries. My point was to prove how easy and stupid it was, how easy we can apply concepts to anything because we're all made to try and make sense of the world. And on the surface, it stands perfectly aligned with much of the art ridiculed on platforms like this, but in a trait very much not heeded on social media. In the real world, if you want to ridicule something, you really have to risk something for it to have any validity. I was sat on my pedestal, reeling off concepts with a bulletproof vest. I fell into the trap that every art student who's just annoyed that their art isn't in vogue falls into. It's the trap you normally fall into after you've written one too many artistic statements with the word juxtaposed in them. So my subversion there wasn't very clever. Yet, if social media is your access point to the canon of artists pushing and pulling concepts about, you'll never sympathise with what they're really trying to do. And if the money is what makes you sick, well, the top of every profession is sickening. But as every publicist knows, outrage can work in your favour if played well. And here, the joke only works because of the absurd amount of money. Catalan is simply carrying on the rich tradition of artists messing with the rules and inviting you to see things a new way. If you accept their invitation and don't judge them the same way you do traditional artists, they might give you an answer that you secretly didn't even know you needed. Because if you hate conceptual and modern art or contemporary art and you moan about it on TikTok clips, or you're an artist who's an expert in realism or craft skill and see no value in where the money attracts, by the end of this video, I'm hoping that should you choose to accept my invitation, you might find the perfect, and I mean perfect, antidote to everything that we all hate about the digital world of doom scrolling, of social divide, and you might just find the cure to the growing nihilism that's creeping into every area of our lives. Now, I know that's a big promise, but let me try. Because the democratization of content where you can watch a video like this in your living room without me passing any gatekeeper is a wonderful thing, but it does have a downside. Because people do like modern and conceptual art. They simply aren't allowed to say they like this stuff without people judging them. So what happens is contemporary artists don't compete on it. And as media like this grows, both parties move away from each other. And they dismiss each other for the same thing. They both think the other is ridiculous and unthinking. So let's ease into this in a way you might not have thought about. Here is a Rothko. Not super testing as art goes, but not super traditional. Now this is a prime example of modern art, even though it was made in the 1950s. And that's because modern art is an unfortunate category for a period of art that exists between maybe 1860 and 1970. Anything made after 1970 is technically called contemporary art. And I know I've used modern art as a loose term in this video for any art produced today, but technically this is modern art. If you don't like this, you probably think it's a black square on top of another kind of odd orangey square, and that's it, mate. Next. It gives you nothing. If this came up as a TikTok with no context, you'd give it, what, 2 seconds? But as we discussed here, TikTok is fireworks. Art that is successful on social media has to hit you in the face. Real world art is much more like stargazing, soothing stillness and a strange connectedness to something way more infinite and powerful if you give it the time, and fundamentally, it's not something you will ever be able to do via a screen. The problem is that it's also something artists know they can't give you through a screen, and another reason why there is now a massive gaping chasm between these two camps. So play along with me here as I give you some context for this painting on how it was first witnessed, and see if at the end of my explanation you feel it has more power than it first appears. Because if you're watching this video and you do like Rothko already, you know that this is a poor representation of the real thing. So, the year is 1954. There's no colour print or TV, so you don't really know what you're going to see. And as you get ready to leave, you hear on the wireless talks of bigger and more destructive atomic bomb testing going on off the coast of your country. You put it to the back of your mind and you turn up your coat, as you may well also be dodging the draft for the military that continues, as you've probably recently returned from the Korean War to news that the Cold War has started and that the Soviet Union have just developed their own atomic bomb. The US recently launched its Duck and Cover campaign, teaching your children to hide under desks in their schools should they see the white flash of a Soviet nuclear attack. You shake these modern day fears off as you get excited to see what's so impactful about this Rothko and his modern art. And you get a bit surprised as you approach the gallery that it seems to have its lights off. You enter a deliberately darkened gallery with felt that's been put up on the walls to dampen the sound, which creates a kind of profound silence. And the painting you want to see, Dark Over Light, number 7, sits alone, with no other art near it. And oddly, it's not in the open gallery. It's in a galleyway, which means you have to approach it from the side and you can't stand back from it. And through the soft haze and the silence, you see this vast, near 3 metre high painting hung so that your eye line follows the thin, rough, yellow horizon. With deep orange fringes at your feet, your eye is drawn upwards into this profound, total blackness. You have to crack your neck to see the very top of the painting. You have never seen or witnessed anything like this before. In the silence and the darkness, you recognise that this art is giving you something totally new and has a profound emotional power. And tell me that that experience is the same as yours as you load up this picture 70 years later for 4 seconds on your bright 4-inch phone screen as you shrug. I just don't get it. It's just 2 squares. I think that frankly, you're a fool for thinking that you could paint that today. Perhaps you could mimic the brushwork, you could produce a replica, but you'd also need to touch the nerve of a nation like Rothko did then. Make equivalent art as impactful for today's issues, if you can. No one's stopping you if it's so easy. In the age of social media, where people have seen more content ridiculing art than the experience of viewing art themselves, they have a totally deluded view of what art is. TikTok or YouTube content must give you an emotion in a second to stop you scrolling, so it must provide everything instantly. Anger, shame, sadness, rage, humour, cuteness, outrage, all within 10 seconds of scrolling. You learn that you must be given what to feel, and fast, but nothing in our evolution has prepared us to have our senses hijacked like that. But once overloaded, you look at art and snap to, what am I getting? But it's so often the exact tonic you need to find connection to other forms of artistic expression made by humans that require you to bring yourself to them in a more equitable and healthy dynamic. Nothing will resonate deeply with you unless you use it to help unlock in yourself a deeper sentiment and bring that to the table. If you even could do that for every social media clip, you'd be a shell of a person in 60 seconds, pinballed between every extreme emotion that you could possibly feel. And so hopefully that places you in a frame where if you want to we can test these things a little further now, like something a little bit more challenging. But if you still don't like Rothko or see value in it, that's okay. And if you don't like what I'm about to show you next, that's fine. Because the beauty of art is it's always been completely subjective. And it has to be. If a parent has value for their kids' stick figure drawings of their family, which mean nothing to you or me, then we must accept that everyone is free to wiggle where they want. Now, if you are expecting something to grab you in these works, you will find nothing to hold on to. That doesn't mean it's not there or has no value, but let's just encounter it. This is Klein. Let's just sit with this while I first describe to you the practical limitations of how you are seeing this, but in a different way to Rothko. The history of the colour blue in painting is fascinating. We take it for granted today, but the only way you used to be able to make ultramarine blue was from lapis lazuli, a really precious stone mined in Afghanistan. And in the Renaissance, it was more expensive than gold. The process of turning this into pigment was laborious, and you only ever produce tiny amounts. And today what we use is completely synthetic. But you can still get the original ultramarine. It's just not that cheap. But what Klein did was to work with scientists to mix pigment of ultramarine blue into a synthetic transparent resin rather than traditional oil or acrylic that you would use for painting. And that means it's terrible paint. It wouldn't flow, and it's impossible to mix. And the pigment is totally locked in. But on its own, it then dries completely matte with a kind of velvety look of the pure pigment. And the resin allows light to diffuse across it. You remember a few years ago, they invented that ultimate black. I think it was called Venta Black. And it absorbed all light and let none out again. Well, it's a little bit like that, but rather than just not reflecting anything, it diffuses it within itself. It's not only the deepest and most radiant blue you'd ever see, but also looks a little bit like it's hovering because it doesn't flow, so it's more kind of sculptural and blocky in its application, and the effect is really peculiar. By its own right, it's just an object that's pretty fascinating. But it's not just any object. It's a painting in a gallery. Imagine that we are walking into that gallery. What expectations do you bring when you walk into a gallery? You expect story, subject, something to be given to you or to react to. Even excluding how much social media has ruined this for us now, you'd still expect something, right? Well, Klein wanted to see what happened when you take everything out of art, but keep the exercise of engagement the same as with a normal painting, to show silence, if you will, to see how you react when you have nothing to react to. It's so quick to say, well, nothing. But something about this blue soaks into you, as if falling through a vivid sky. You just tumble as you try to think about what you think. You are tricked into a form of strange meditation. These days, people talk about raw dogging flights and doing nothing for an hour to gain back their attention span. Well, do it in a modern art gallery, you moron, because with Klein's work, all reports of people over the past 50 years where this picture's been shown stare longer at it than any of the paintings that it's placed with, wherever it's placed. It's like being swallowed up by a vast ocean that gives you nothing to hold on to. You don't read into it, you just kind of fall into it. There's a fantastic artist who spoke about how once children learn to write, they stop really making art, because now we have a way to try and make sense and articulate things, where really, in the universe, none of us know what's going on. Don't really need to understand it all. We can feel it, and there is something really rewarding in that if you understand how to do it. And to expect to get that feeling from a reel of a dismissive teen on a phone screen, I mean, man, you just never will. There's no hope. They were designed to be witnessed in person, which is why, as this world and the way you're watching this video dominate, that world is seeming more and more detached, because there's just no way to translate that feeling to you here and to teach you how to do that. It is actually the perfect antidote. But because we've been trained on nearly every way to think by maybe YouTube tutorials now, we've lost what you can actually learn from engaging in in-person culture. While these were designed to be witnessed in person, you know what's even more in person than that? the performance pieces that get ridiculed in vast waves on social media by people who genuinely believe the value in art is purely hand-skilled craft. These performance pieces are not that, and they are not trying to be. And to think that you will understand what it feels like to witness these pieces from 16 of them flashing past you is exactly why most of these artists don't even have a social media account. They know that this is not their medium. Yet the public can't seem to understand that and still judge them through it. It's like trying to taste a meal by licking a photograph of it. The reason you can't learn from a screen is because a screen filters out the physical, the visceral reality of human interaction. Looking at pixels, you're in a safe, detached bubble where you can easily dismiss and mock what you see without any real stakes. There's no bodily presence. You're not going to get thumped if you say what you could so comfortably type. But you also wouldn't say that. Behind a screen, you don't have to worry about anyone's feelings. And even if you type really mean things, which I know people who have done, they're not mean people in real life. There is a shared build-up of atmosphere. There's a shared energy. The illusion of safety behind a screen is just that. It's an illusion. People online feel free to say, this is shit, because they think it's a consequence-free zone. But it's a false freedom, because they're not actually engaging with the reality of other human beings. Whereas an audience member, you are part of the performance. As a person watching it on a screen, you are not. When you're physically there, even if you and your friends hate it, you will feel the tension in the room, see the nuances of other people's body language, and experience that awkwardness, that cringe even. That physical, real-world context forces you to engage with an emotion near impossible to feel online: empathy. Maybe also curiosity. Performance art offers a unique kind of social laboratory. It asks for patience with people and within people to explore something unusual with them. Unlike a chat in the pub or a game in the park, these performances are deliberately designed to push societal boundaries and behaviours, to directly invite us to question norms or ideas in a safe, dedicated space. And what is even more hilarious to me, as I know I'm probably losing you now, is that the very people who seek safety behind a screen and feel the need to comment or get a quick win in mocking modern art often are a bit alternative by social common standards. Ironically, those are very often the exact same traits in artists who are drawn to performance art, because the performance art space is actually the real safe space, where you can test, navigate and question social conventions face to face, rather than hiding behind the illusion of safety with a flipping screen. It's an empathy generating medium, a trait I find often lacking most in its most vocal critics. I'm actually more annoyed that the people in these places are filming them on their phones for them to leak out into the social media space. Don't go to an immersive performance art piece and film it, you tit. But that doesn't mean I expect you to go and enjoy. Most of you probably won't, but just let it sit in its lane. You can't box art in any way, because it has to be meaningless for us to be able to use it to explore ourselves and each other, for we can never know the true meaning of any of the reasons we're really here or how we're supposed to act together, as that changes across every generation drastically and across every culture. It's all mad. Life is a weird performance. We live in a time now when no one seems to really know what to do. It leads to this kind of nihilism, division and siloing anger, and I hate that. We're struggling to connect in ways that feel real, and if you want to find comfort in the meaningless, try being in a space in the real world with people and witness something that explores an abstract absurdity. But since the 90s and the development of this kind of way of interacting, the one thing we probably need more of has disappeared because it's unable to translate into this medium. And I know I'm going off on one now, but the reason it's so beautifully meaningless is because when there's a truth, it means you can pivot around it. But here you can't. So you have to pivot around yourself and each other. And how you feel in reaction to a piece will be totally different to everyone else. You are not dumb or smarter. You are who you are. And the best way to find people who think like you might just be in these spaces. You're silently cringing and you catch someone's eye roll across the room. That's your person. Or on the conclusion of a piece, you feel yourself oddly emotional and you notice another group of people kind of wipe their eyes. You found your tribe. The only objectively shit piece of performance art is the social media comments that criticize it. The irony of these disconnected people sneering at pure human presence while living entirely through pixels. Piss off. I say you're allowed to like what you like, and if you hate conceptual art, that's fine, just let it be. And if you make that kind of art, it exists in the real world, and you're in a better place than any of these critics who don't. They exist in this digital space. Hopefully I've got people to be a little bit more sympathetic to conceptual art, but it's not something I make. But I did briefly visit a performance art school many moons ago, and if you want to see my first ever video essay about a painter that I made in reaction to being at a conceptual art school at that time, 10 years ago, you can watch that here. It's about how Edward Hopper had boring shoes. And if you enjoyed this video, I'm developing the Patreon where you can help me make more of these videos. I want to do a massive shout out to Clementine and Keelan for their supersonic support on the top levels, and all my other patrons who make these videos possible. I just uploaded a video about what's coming and a Q&A and why this channel is now called Art Loud, so go and check it out. And until the next video, I hope your real life performance art piece goes well.